You're listening to the Out of Bounds Show podcast, presented by Independent Roofing Systems. If you want it done right the first time, visit Independent Roofing Systems today.
WRKS Pickens Jackson.
It's all coming back
From the Whiskey 61 Lounge inside the BankPlus Studio.
And there it comes again.
Mississippi's #1 sports talk show. The Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Streaming worldwide live on the Out of Bounds radio app and on your radio. At ESPN 105.9.
What is that?
What is that?
The Zone.
All right, good morning. Welcome in. Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Brought to you by the Bone-In Ribeye, Kessler Prime and the Renaissance. Visit KesslerPrime.com to make a reservation. Enjoy a great steak and, anything on their bourbon list, including Four Roses Single Barrel. You can hit us up on the Farm Bureau Insurance call-in line, 601-995-1059. Farm Bureau Insurance. Bundle your auto and home. Save with your local Farm Bureau Insurance agent. Twitter handle at BoBounds. Brought to you by Rick's Pro Truck. Spray and Bedliners Lift Kits. RPT Rick's Pro Truck. New RPT commercial on Highway 80 right across from Miskelly Furniture. And the famous text line, 601-885-3776. It's brought to you by Ag Up Equipment, Mississippi Ag. Manage your land with the John Deere tractor. AgUp.com, 2 locations in the metro area, Canton and Pearl. 16 total, 18 coming. AgUp.com. That text line again, 601-885-3776. Your thoughts on Ole Miss Liberty? Hugh Freeze coming back to town. And, of course, he still has a house in Oxford. And, the quarterbacks this weekend are a lot of fun. Malik Willis, Matt Corral, kind of already established. You know, they're, according to many NFL draft insiders, those guys are battling it out, will continue to compete all the way through March and April to be the #1 quarterback selected in the NFL. Corral's had an amazing career at Ole Miss. For the most part, he's carried this whole thing. He is a big time, he's the biggest playmaker in the country. He's been, nicked up the last couple of weeks. So is Will Rogers. So is KJ Jefferson. We'll get into that in a second. But Malik Willis and Matt Corral and Vaught Hemingway, that's going to be fun. Future NFL QBs. The other game is Mississippi State at Arkansas. You got 2 Mississippi high school quarterbacks. In Will Rogers from Brandon, again, his dad's a high school coach. That's where Gardner Minshew played. There's all these ties and so on. And Will, thrown to the Wolves early as a true freshman, thought he just showed so much of all the stuff that we talk about last year. He's getting better and better and is not close to where he will be by next year. And so he has another road game to prove himself at a place that's more fired up than they've been than the last few years, as Arkansas's been losing a lot. And then Pittman has infused a lot of energy and excitement in that program with some of the wins that they've attained. And KJ Jefferson is from North Panola, and he's a young man that has showed that he can play, and he's still refining his game too. So we have 2 Mississippi high school quarterbacks Saturday in Fayetteville, Will Rogers from Brandon and KJ Jefferson from North Panola. So that's exciting. Lane Kiffin's been talking a lot about injuries this week. Everybody's injured at this point in the season. Again, Corral and Will Rogers have both sustained injuries and are playing through them, and playing well, for that matter, because basically you have to. It's just the way it is. But Kiffin talking a lot about their injuries, maybe a little too much. I don't know. And we'll see. I mean, You got to go with who you got at this point. November football is always not only very interesting and compelling, but it's the whole battle of attrition going down the stretch. Nobody feels great, but you still have all these games left. So it's both a challenge and exciting. Some people are talking about the wide receiver depth at Ole Miss. You know, Ole Miss has been on this run at wide receiver since, I don't know, Mike Wallace and then Dante Moncrief. You know, I mean, those are super talented dudes. And then, of course, Freeze, no pun intended, loaded up the boat with unbelievable prospects at the wide receiver position, including Laquan. But, I mean, even guys like, you know, that were B options, like Adebojo and Core. Very, very talented guys. And then, you know, the whole AJDK haul was huge. He only coached them for 1 year, I guess. But, so, you know, they've been on this run. And then Elijah Moore was an absolute baller. People are kind of asking the question, who do we have? Drummond has been, you know, injured a little bit on the hamstring. Sanders has been fighting through injury. Mingo's out to at least next week, if not longer. Dennis Jackson's been okay. Really, Shakur Pearson, I think it is the little dude that they've been using more. You know, he's athletic and shifty and fast and speedy. And then, of course, they've got the guys coming out of the backfield who are more than capable in Ely and Parrish, and I guess Snoop to a certain extent. But some people are quite, you know, where's our depth and who are the next guys? You know, I don't know about that. With Drummond and Sanders leaving, even with all that, John Rice Plumlee hasn't received any meaningful snaps, which I think is interesting. And there's kind of some questions around wide receiver recruiting, which we haven't heard that at Ole Miss in forever.
Isn't that amazing, too? I went back and looked, Bo, in 2020, which is the class that obviously Kiffin took over, so to speak. So it's probably mostly Matt Luke's crew that put that together, and then Kiffin kind of wrangled it in. But they signed a transfer receiver from Florida, Deontay Marks, who has not done anything yet, and then they signed one player out of high school who is considered a receiver, Mark Britt. He was an athlete out of high school, but he is a receiver out of Miami, Florida, but he has not done anything yet. And so that's only two like receiving pass catchers like that in the entire class of 2020, which now you're starting to see that bubble of, well, who's the next guy up since we've lost three guys?
Right.
And I just think that's interesting. That's, like you said, I've always felt like Ole Miss signs 5 receivers a class minimum, you know?
Yeah, nets out 2 that are good. And then you compound that, and it's like they're 6 deep every year. So I get where you're going. That's something to keep an eye on. I mean, they usually figure it out at that position, so I don't know how hot and bothered I'm going to get over that. You can always add a transfer, sign a player, and all of a sudden you're fine. There are receivers for days between Texas and Georgia. So that's why we always question how in the world Dan Mullen and Billy Gonzalez couldn't bring anybody in. I mean, that's that you have to like try to do that. And now Leach, you know, and his crew, give Moorhead a little bit of credit, but Leach and his crew have really identified, or at least they're getting the most out of their wide receiver unit. They still don't have a WR1. They need one. And he may be on the roster or they got to go find him. They've got a nice collection, a nice group of players, but they still need to, you know, bump it up several tiers.
You never could have convinced me Braylon Sanders would only have 13 catches at this point in the season.
Yeah, that's been, again, he's been hampered by injury, and 2, I guess, defenses, when he has played, have been focused on him to the point where it did earlier in the year. It opened up Drummond, Blake, to have some big games. And so Kiffin's going to take advantage of that, depending on what you do. The Out of Bounds show is brought to you by Superior Foundation for all your foundation repairs, superior.ms. And the show is also brought to you by the New York-style pizza at Sal and Mookie's in Madison. Delicious pizza. You can order award-winning Jonesy Q rubs and sauces at jonesyq.com. Use promo code OOBSHOW if you order $20 or more and receive free shipping. That's jonesyq.com. Promo code OOBSHOW. Thank you, Will. I've got Blake Mania with me. I'm your host, Bo Bounds. The show is brought to you by Fleetway Market. Fuel up with Fleetway Market. The Market Cafe is in Gluckstadt, at the Gluckstadt location. Market Cafe, Fleetway Market. Great food. They've got their tailgating menu, but they're also rolling out lunch, and it's a really good menu. They've got a great selection of craft beer and domestic and import. Fleetway Market. Fuel up at Fleetway Market on the way to your next high school football, college football, hunting camp, road trip. When it comes to road trips, it's powered by Fleetway Market in Gluckstadt, Fleetway Market, Highway 51 in Madison, and in Dogwood. They have over 20 locations. When you see Fleetway Market, go ahead and pull over, fill up, and get everything that you need. You're listening to 105.9 The Zone ESPN. No MRA football tomorrow night on ESPN 105.9 The Zone. They'll be back next week. They have a bye. And I think they'll play the winner of JA and PCS. And then on the other side, Hartfield's number 2. And then they got a bye. And I think Prep and Park Lane play tomorrow night. So Hartfield and MRA will play the winners. I think JA and PCS had a crazy game a couple weeks ago. So we'll see how that shakes out. We'll have MRA football on ESPN 105.9 The Zone next Friday. Herbert Davis and his crew continue to march on. And we'll see who ends up in the championship. You know, MRA, Hartfield, J, Prep. Number of teams competing here down the stretch. MHSAA, as the playoffs are right around the corner, too. So very, very exciting. Stone Blanton is the linebacker at MRA. He is deciding between Mississippi State and Ole Miss. Davis Dalton is committed to Southern Miss. And John White is the sophomore quarterback who has had a really good year. They've got Street Toller and others leading the way there. And so it's going to be interesting to see what plays out the next few weeks. That championship will be at Mississippi College this year. And last year it was at Veterans Memorial because of the COVID deal. And MHSAA will march on into their championships at Memorial Stadium. So pretty cool and exciting as we'll see what shakes out on that level. Blake and I were discussing, Ole Miss and Mississippi State. These are intriguing matchups this weekend. Ole Miss favored by 9 to 10 points, depending on the book that you're landing on. People are wondering why that's not 14 to 16 points, maybe even 17, exactly. 18. Is that because of the concern around Matt Corral's ankle? I would have to believe that's what's driving it. Ole Miss is light years more talented than Liberty. Obviously, none of us ever talked about Liberty until Hugh Freeze went there, right? I never watched a snap of Liberty football. Actually, I didn't even know they had a football team until Hugh Freeze took the job. But they got all that money from all the online stuff and everything else that they do. And they poured $25 million into a facility. Hugh's getting paid a couple $1 million a year. We expect him to make a jump in December, but we expected him to make a jump last December. Could he find his way to like a Texas Tech or Washington State? Off the grid. Wherever he goes, he's going to win. It doesn't matter. He's a guy that can win out in the middle of nowhere because he coaches offense and he gets the deal in the quarterback position. But Freeze will run out of the tunnel on Saturday at about 10:50 a.m. Now, they'll have already done warm-ups, and he'll go talk to Lane, in the kind of 10 a.m. time frame when everybody's out there doing their drills and getting loose and so on. But Freeze will lead Liberty out of the tunnel at Vaught Hemingway with a Liberty visor and pullover on.
Can I ask you this question? Because we always get the like we know how a majority of State fans, the vocal, but or maybe not majority is not the right. We know how a lot of the people who talk to us feel about Dan Mullen and the Twitter streets and the message board streets. Right, it's a lot of vitriol. How do you think fans should feel about Hugh Freeze, Ole Miss fans?
How should they feel? I don't know. They're going to feel how. I mean. I think there's obviously a lot of disappointment and a lot of what might have been. And how did we lose that momentum from the 2015 Sugar Bowl? I think the flip side is a lot of them are like, hey, 13, 14, and 15 were amazing. Well, 12 too, I guess. I mean, that was his first year. He got it up and rolling. 12 through 15 was amazing. Look, I got to give Hugh – I don't know who gave him the Cliff Notes, but he – well, I take that back, Blake. I remember being on the air in where you are right now in the Pear Orchard studio when he was hired, and people threw an absolute fit. Because there were all these names floated, John Gruden, Tony Dungy, all this crazy nonsense. And so Hugh was hired, and people were downright ticked. But a couple things happened in year one. He landed Bo Wallace, who he had been with at Arkansas State, which Bo Wallace changed the whole trajectory of the program. A phenomenal player. Phenomenal. Will never get his due, but whatever. Neither will Nick Fitzgerald. And we just take it for granted, these guys that just, crazy production every Saturday. But when he landed Bo Wallace and they beat Mississippi State in 2012, and they had lost 3 years in a row, which hadn't happened in like 60 years, and 2 months later he landed a top 10 class with Treadwell, Kimdichie, Connor, and Tunzel, and it was boom, off and running. And so I think there's just this unbelievable – we had so much fun. He told us everything that we wanted to hear. I mean, Freeze did it. He told Ole Miss fans every week how awesome they were, how awesome Oxford was. I mean, he had the game plan and the notes. Again, part politician, part preacher, and was great at it. And then the summer of 2017 was absolutely wild, too. And so I think that there will be, hey, I had a great time, and I'm also disappointed. But I also think they've moved on now. They probably didn't move on under Luke because most people weren't really, really sold on that. Now that Lane has had success, I think that you've had more people move on and get behind. I'll give Ole Miss this. When they get a coach, they get behind him. Mississippi State doesn't always do that. I mean, there's still this percentage of people who never even got behind Leach in the first place. Then when you had the whole Colin Hill debacle, and I think he took some guys with him and really had messed up, and made the locker room rotten. With that whole debacle last year, it was very herky-jerky, no momentum, da-da-da-da. There's still a percentage that are not, behind. Look, since I've been on, Cutcliffe, Ogeron, Houston Nutt. Hold on. Let me make sure I got this. Cutcliffe when I started. Ogeron, Houston Nutt, Hugh Freeze. Luke's different deal. And they get behind their guy. That is one thing that Ole Miss does. Period. They get behind their guy. Not so much at Mississippi State. It's just one of those weird deals. But we'll see. I mean, who knows where Kiffin and Leach will be over the next year, 2 or 3. This is going to be a lot of fun to see how it plays out, to see what works, to see who they beat, to, watch the programs kind of develop underneath their leadership. It's going to be a lot of fun. Steve Palazzolo is coming up next. Pro Football Focus, PFF.com. The show is brought to you by USA Pawn. Today, tomorrow, and Saturday, 10% off. All 6 locations, everything in the store, celebrating 30 years. USA Pawn, usapawn.com.
The Out of Bounds Show podcast is brought to you by Kessler Prime. For the best steaks in Mississippi, visit Kessler Prime in the Renaissance.
All right, good morning. Welcome in. Sal and Mookie's in Madison and Jackson. New York-style pizza. Great game day wings. Tuesday through Friday. New York-style pizza lunch specials. All at Sal and Mookie's in Madison and Jackson. They also have Bell's Two-Hearted Ale on tap. Bell's Two-Hearted Ale, which is the official beer of the Out of Bounds show for the next couple of months, ranked the number 1 craft beer in the country the last 4 years. Sal and Mookie's in Madison has Bell's Two-Hearted Ale on tap and delicious New York-style pizza. Don't forget about their game day wings. Want to welcome you in, Out of Bounds, 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. Also, real quick, the Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary game this weekend, Ole Miss Liberty. 2 NFL QB. The NFL draft insiders think that the 2 guys playing in Vaught-Hemingway Stadium this weekend, Matt Corral and Malik Willis, are competing to be the first quarterback taken in the first round of the draft next April. The Tito's Vodka Bloody Mary game is always the 11 a.m. game, and that is Ole Miss and Liberty, and also Hugh Freeze. Oh, the storylines. Hugh Freeze, one of the most polarizing people we've had in the state of Mississippi. Hugh Freeze will be leading Liberty and Malik Willis against Matt Corral, who we don't know how healthy he is, and Lane Kiffin. We want to welcome in our friend Steve Palazzolo, NFL insider, PFF.com, Pro Football Focus. Steve joins us on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. Man, there's a lot to get here to, Steve. When you look at Aaron Rodgers and what happened yesterday with the COVID thing, he's not going to play this weekend. And we know that we feel pretty confident he's not going to be a Packer next year. So now we get to see Jordan Love play. He hasn't taken a meaningful snap. So don't you think this is intriguing that Jordan Love we weren't sure he would get any meaningful snaps this year, and he'll get some against a Chiefs team that is struggling. How do you see this, and what are your expectations for Jordan Love this weekend?
Yeah, it's definitely intriguing. It's unfortunate we don't get to see Rodgers versus Mahomes. 2 years ago, Matt Moore got the start for the Chiefs, and now it's going to be Jordan Love for the Packers. But I'm intrigued to see Jordan Love just because of the way you laid it out. Right, it might be his team next year at this point. I'm expecting, when you saw Jordan Love in the preseason, you saw some of the reasons why he was a first-round pick. Some really nice throws. He's got a good arm. He's got good touch. But you also saw some of the reasons why we weren't really excited about him as a first-round pick, and others weren't either, is some of the decision-making in the preseason was horrible, much like it was at Utah State, particularly his last season, where he was just chucking it up into coverage and, saying a prayer and hoping it wasn't getting intercepted. So we might see some of both, in that Sunday matchup where you have a few throws where Packers fans are like, all right, that's our future. They're looking pretty good. And then a few other throws where it's like, all right, let's fire up that Matt Corral tape just in case he's available, right? Like, let's look for that next quarterback. So might be a bit of a roller coaster ride, I think, for Jordan Love in his first start.
Okay. What are you seeing? We're midway through for the Chiefs. No, well, kind of. We're 17 games, so whatever. 8 games in, 4-4. I know I asked you last week. They come away with a win. What are you seeing from the Chiefs?
It's fascinating to me that this was like the most demoralizing win I've ever seen. Everybody's just so down on the Chiefs for only winning 20-17, right? It is different, right? It feels different. They scored 23 points in their last 2 games. That is un-Chief-like. That used to be a quarter. So what you're seeing is teams playing a lot of too high shells. You're hearing that buzzword going around, buzzes around the league, where they're inviting them to throw the ball underneath or to run the ball. They're trying to take away the big plays. Teams are doing everything they can to take away Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, and I think they're doing a pretty good job of it. It was much like what the Bucs did in the Super Bowl. Bill Belichick has had some success just focusing, overloading on those two guys. And I think what you're seeing is the Chiefs' offseason team-building decisions maybe coming back to bite a little bit, where they don't have that true third option. It's not Mecole Hardman. It's not Byron Pringle. They don't have a good third receiver. They don't have a good third option for Mahomes to go to. And they have some drives where they're patient and they're taking the underneath stuff, and then other drives where Mahomes isn't patient and he's trying to make big plays and putting the ball in harm's way. And it's just disjointed. It's a mess right now. But I think at the heart of it, having more weapons would be better for the Chiefs. And then Mahomes and Andy Reid and Eric Bieniemy, they have to figure out some adjustments here and play a game where maybe they're not going to get to chuck it down the field like they have before. They've done it before. They've done this before, but got to play a good, patient game and take what the defense is giving. So it's adjustment time for the Chiefs, because right now that offense is just ugly and uncomfortable compared to what we're used to seeing.
Oh, Steve Palazzolo, NFL insider, Pro Football Focus on the Bell's Two-Hearted Ale guest line. Steve, let's go to Tennessee and the Titans. A.J. Brown's coming off a big game. Derrick Henry is out. Their second leading rusher is their quarterback. So with A.J. having a big weekend last weekend, and Julio's hasn't really done anything, and Vrabel is obviously a good coach, and they figure out ways to win. But with King Henry out, how does that impact Tannehill and A.J.? What do you see?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because clearly there are two Ryan Tannehill careers. There's the Miami Dolphins, where he was an average starter. And then with the Titans, he's been a well above average starter. He's been fantastic, and his game has been different. On the other side, though, too, we've seen Derrick Henry's production also go way up since Ryan Tannehill took over as the starter. So those guys are a tandem that has been, essentially the catalyst for that Titans offense, along with A.J. Brown. I think A.J. Brown's a true number one receiver that is a fourth multiplier for an offense. You see that last week, right? It's like a 15-yard out that turns into a 57-yard touchdown. You just don't get that all the time. A.J. Brown is special and allows those plays to happen. So I think what we're going to see here is obviously less reliance on the run game. Derrick Henry is probably the running back that just creates defensive differences more than anyone else, creates those 8-man boxes, creates one-on-ones on the outside, because teams truly do account for trying to stop Derrick Henry. I think you'll see more double coverage for A.J. Brown. It'll put more pressure when Julio's healthy on, him being back up to speed. So I think Tennessee's going to have to, run the ball enough, but they're going to have to win through the pass game. It's more pressure on Tannehill. It's more pressure on the passing attack. And, you're not going to have 30 handoffs to Tennessee running backs anymore. I don't think it makes sense when you don't have Derrick Henry back then. So they'll have to adjust to how defenses are going to start playing them. But it's a big loss just because Derrick Henry creates those one-on-one opportunities on the outside, and you're just not going to have as many of those now with him out of the lineup.
Okay, so with all the A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons fans we have here, how do you feel about them? I mean, I know it's still early. There's a lot of football left to be played. Losing King Henry, Julio, we don't know what's going on there. I mean, where are you with Tennessee?
I think the AFC is still wide open. And, look, I envisioned this world a few years ago where Tom Brady's gone, even though he's not yet. Drew Brees is gone, and Phillip Rivers, and Big Ben's getting old. All these, Peyton Manning, all these guys are gone. And then the NFL becomes this wild, wild west. Like, there's no clear top 5 quarterbacks that are dominating or anything like that. And now that Mahomes has dropped off so far this year, it's kind of the way it is, right? Like, the AFC is as wide open as it gets. So I think the Titans are right there in that mix. I think the Bills are probably the best team, but the Titans beat them a couple weeks ago. They showed that they could beat the best teams in the AFC. So I think the Bills are up there. The Ravens are as dangerous as ever, even though they lost to the Bengals a couple weeks ago. The Raiders still have more to prove, but they're sitting atop the AFC West. The Chargers are still good, but the Titans have as good a shot as any team as long as they can hold it together on defense and then find other ways to play offensively without Derrick Henry. But I've been really impressed with what the Titans defense has done because of so many injuries, and Jeffrey Simmons is a part of that as the anchor in the middle. And I'm just really impressed with the job Vrabel's done in Tennessee. So I think they're right up there with everyone else in the AFC right now.
Okay, so for our listeners, something to keep an eye on. King Henry out. We'll see what happens with Julio. Adjustments for days. A lot of you have become Tennessee Titans fans because of A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons. NFL insider Steve Palazzolo, PFF.com. He's got the podcast, all kinds of cool stuff on the site. He joins us on the Bells Two Hearted Ale guest line. I think Dak's playing this weekend, Steve, because I don't think there's any way he's going to sit out again. The Cowboys were able to get a really, really good road win at Minnesota. They host Denver. Do you expect Dak to play this weekend?
I mean, I thought he was going to play last week. There's no, I've never really had a calf injury, but it felt like he was going to play. Apparently, these calf injuries are rough. Actually, I will tell you, I had a fake calf injury one time. The Mariners had to put me on the disabled list or the injured list. And they said, "What do you want to have? A calf?" I said, "Okay, let's make it a calf injury." So I had a calf injury before. So I can relate to that.
Hold on. What were you in AA, AAA with the Seattle Mariners at this time? Tell me what's happening.
I was in AAA, and when you're like the 13th pitcher on the staff, and they've got other players that they want to see, you sometimes get put on the phantom DL, as they call it. So they make up an injury for you. You're out for 7 days, and they let the other guys pitch. So anyway, I had the calf injury. I'm basically just like Dak. But I would have played through it, because it wasn't hurting me all that bad. So I didn't realize the calf injury would be that tough, But you saw Dak moving around before the game, and I could see him coming back. It was really huge for the Cowboys to just stay in the mix because the NFC is so competitive at the top. You got a great performance from Cooper Rush, make some big throws under pressure late in the game. You ran the offense well. I think it also shows just the power of the playmakers in Dallas, what they have. Zeke saves the game running through contact to pick up the first down. Amari Cooper's awesome. CeeDee Lamb's awesome. So you kind of see the depth of Dallas in that team. The defense was fantastic, and it was huge, right? So it saved the week, saved the win, and I could see Dak coming back and having a really good game against Denver this week.
We have a listener that's upset that I didn't ask you about the Titans signing Adrian Peterson, who's 45 years old. Would you give me 20 seconds on that, please?
Yeah, he's 45 years old. He'll get the Titans have a good run blocking team, so he'll get what's blocked up. I don't know that he has. He'll break off a big run here and there. I don't think Adrian Peterson is doing anything special at this point in his career.
Bam. All right, we're continuing to roll on with Steve Palazzolo, NFL QB discussion. It's Armchair QB Thursday. The show is brought to you by Bell's Two Hearted Ale. Steve joins us on 105.9 The Zone, ESPN. All right, if you're the Saints, you got the Falcons this weekend. They were able to beat Brady and the Buccaneers with everything that played out last weekend. With Trevor Siemian, there's all this talk. I don't understand the love affair with Taysom Hill. Help me out. Where do you think this is going with the Saints and Peyton and the quarterback position now that Winston's out, Steve?
I mean, I think Taysom's better than Trevor Siemian. I thought, Siemian, he threw a pick in the end zone, and then he kind of got pushed down, so it got negated. I mean, I don't think Siemian played a great game last week, even though they made it work. So I would roll with Taysom. I think Taysom obviously brings that run game element, so you don't have to be as perfect in the pass game. They'll get 8 or 10 carries a game, and they'll continue that run-first approach that they had with Jameis, but they'll also have a QB in the mix there. So I think it becomes Taysom's team. It's unfortunate. I was really excited watching Jameis Winston and watching his, him working with Sean Payton and the evolution of Jameis's game, and which was still a little up and down, but you saw elements of he's adjusting to Payton's style. So I'm sad not being able to see that play out, but I think we continue to see that Sean Payton is just a fantastic coach. The entire Saints front office has done a great job of building one of the best offensive lines in the league, one of the best defenses in the league, great secondary that can compete in any given week, and that truly is one of the equalizers in the NFL. Like, if you can cover, if you can make life a little difficult for opposing quarterbacks, you can at least compete, and the Saints have that. So there might be some ugly in there. It's not the Drew Brees fun Saints that we've seen through the years that are putting up 30 points a game, but I think they can win games with Taysom, and they'll just have to build around his skill set, which obviously involves him running the ball as part of the design run game.
Steve Palazzolo on the Out of Bounds show. Let's go to the Los Angeles Rams. Sean McVay, Les Sneed, the general manager. They're aggressive. They'll give up picks. They go get Von Miller. They give up some more picks. Denver eats the, $9 million out of the 9.7 or something. In the Pro Football Focus think tank, where y'all discuss everything that's going on week to week, what is the consensus on the Rams' approach and what Les Sneed and McVay are doing, Steve?
Yeah, I might need an hour to break this down. I don't think we have that, but I mean, there are the instant reaction. I think from a lot of people around PFF is like, "Wow, that's crazy," because they're giving up so many draft picks. There are some of us though, and there's other people, my podcast partner Sam in particular, who's like, "Wait a second, look at what the Rams have done historically. They do still draft. They've drafted 9 players per year, and the reason why it feels uncomfortable is because historically, if you don't have draft picks, your team's going to be bad within 2 or 3 years. If you just draft 4 times a year, it's going to catch up. This happened to the Saints a few years back. But what the Rams are doing though is they're just saying, look, maybe we don't need as many first or second rounders, but we're going to stock up on 3rd to 7th rounders because the hit rate is really all over the place in the draft. So why are we going to take the chance on missing on a 1st or 2nd round pick when we can have Matthew Stafford, we can have Von Miller, we can have Jalen Ramsey? And I get it. But I would say this particular move is the riskiest of the bunch because it really is for just 9 games plus the playoffs of Von Miller. So you're getting a half a season, and at the end of the year, the value of this trade is gone. And, all of a sudden you're out a 2nd and a 3rd rounder, which is significant, right? Those add up. So it's a risky move, but I think the Rams have done a great job of having a star-heavy team with Ramsey and Donald and now Vaughn and Matthew Stafford. But their development has been so good with undrafted free agents, with 4th, 5th, 6th rounders all sprinkled throughout their lineup. They've been able to mitigate that. And it's a risky strategy going forward to always rely on that, but it's an aggressive one. And, look, it might be Super Bowl or bust to make this Von Miller trade worthwhile, but I think it's a fascinating strategy where the Rams feel like they're going all in. And historically, that is risky in the NFL. That is not a good thing. That's why I think people in PFF say that's bad. Don't do that. But the Rams are different because they're saving it a little on the back end, getting compensatory picks, and they're still drafting a lot and adding depth to their team, which is usually the thing that teams don't do to kind of like offset the aggressive move. So I like what the Rams are doing. It's fascinating, and I can't wait to see how it plays out because it's unique around the NFL.
Let's go back real quick to the Broncos and the Cowboys because I shouldn't have done it with the Adrian Peterson thing to the Titans. And you were talking about Dak and so on. What should Cowboy fans be looking for from the Denver Broncos on Sunday, Steve?
Denver, they started out really good defensively this year, tapered off a little bit as they played some better teams, but generally it's Vic Fangio as the head coach. They play a sound defensive scheme where they try to make you earn it underneath. On paper, they've got a very good secondary. Patrick Surtain, the 1st-round pick at corner, and Ronald Darby, the guys that they brought in this offseason to load up in the secondary. Justin Simmons is one of the best safeties in the league. So they have a good secondary. They have a good group that, again, generally makes you earn it throwing the ball down the field. Now, you can run the ball on them a little bit. Their pass rush, now that they lose Von Miller, their pass rush he was their only pass rusher, really. So I expect the Cowboys to win the line of scrimmage. And then they'll have to probably earn their big plays down the field. Offensively, Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, he's been a little up and down, a little bit more aggressive this year, not as conservative throwing the ball underneath. They got some decent receivers. And, in a given week, they can compete as far as, putting points on the board, but they've been inconsistent as well as far as, converting in the red zone and just doing all the things you need to do to put points on the board. They've got playmakers, but just really inconsistent offensively. So could be a decent game, but Denver's tapered off a little bit after a really solid start early in the season.
All right. Do you have a bet of the week for us?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Okay.
Sorry, should I?
No. I just wanted to throw you a curveball
yet.
and see what you thought there. let's do this. How's your fantasy football team doing?
I've got my dynasty league, which I do pretty well, and I drafted really well about 5 or 6 years ago, so I keep winning this league. So I think I'm 6-2 so far. And then there's a secret. Blake will love this. There's a secret league that we're developing. Somebody's developing with us here called All 22 Fantasy, where you can draft offensive linemen and defensive linemen and the whole deal, and it's based off PFF grades. And that might be live as early as next year. So I've got one of those leagues going on. I'm doing pretty well. Pretty well in that league, which is just in beta version right now. We're just playing around, but I think it's going to be fun in the coming years.
All right, what did you think about my Atlanta Braves winning the World Series?
That was a great story. It was great. People like you that grew up on Dale Murphy, and then people closer to my generation, like my best friend back home, just watched the Braves on TBS all the time and loved, the Maddox Braves and Glavine and all those guys. And I think there's a lot of Braves fans just around the country that we're excited to see that. And, of course, it's the hated Astros. But amazing story with the Braves, kind of coming out of nowhere in the second half of the year and being the underdogs all the way is really impressive. So, yeah, I thought it was fun to watch.
All right. Real quick, Blake wants to know about Odell Beckham Jr. He's 29 years old. He's on the back nine. You get the sense he's wasted several years of a career that could have been Hall of Fame-ish.
Yeah.
Where is this going, Steve?
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for what happened in Cleveland, why it didn't work, why it hasn't worked, but there's risk involved if another team tries to pick up OBJ. I mean, he's 3 or 4 years probably removed from being an elite player, and for whatever reason, he just could not get on the same page with the quarterbacks in Cleveland, mostly Baker Mayfield. And, at one point it looked like, hey, OBJ can do everything, win down the field, he's good after the catch, he does it all, but he hasn't been that guy in the last couple of years, so he's probably worth a flyer just to see if somebody can recapture that magic. But, man, it hasn't been there these last couple of years. Really a disappointing it ends up becoming a very disappointing trade by the Browns, which I would have made, 1,000 times, right? Bring in OBJ and be that true number one. But he just has not been the same guy. Injuries have played a part, but he hasn't been the same guy these last couple of years.
No. Wow. Steve Palazzolo, Pro Football Focus, PFF.com, NFL Insider podcast, all sorts of things going on. And he joined us on the Bell's Two-Hearted L guest line. Steve, appreciate it, dude. Take care. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, Blake, so we both think that Dak's going to play. Rodgers is out against the Chiefs. I agree with Steve. It would have been fun to see the Rodgers-Mahomes matchup. He's going with Taysom Hill over Trevor Siemian because of Hill's ability to run. And that's going to be wild to see how that looks over the next few weeks. Will the Chiefs get their act together? And then here's something else, Blake. A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons with the Titans. It's like a well-built team, but without King Henry.
Yep.
And with Julio, what are we doing? A lot of pressure on Ryan Tannehill and A.J. Brown and Jeffrey Simmons in Tennessee, Blake.
Yep.
And they've got what you could argue is the biggest game of the weekend. I mean, there's a bunch of big ones, but that's a huge game traveling out to L.A. to play the Rams with A.J. and Jeffrey.
And now Von Miller, that vaunted defense for the Rams. We'll see how that experiment works.
Yeah. All right, the Out of Bounds Show, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, is brought to you by Mississippi Sports Medicine and Orthopedic Center. Any age, any injury, they've got you covered. They'll get you back on the field or the court. MississippiSportsMedicine.com for any orthopedic hiccup. MississippiSportsMedicine.com for any orthopedic hiccup. Back in a second.